We've had apologies for Councillor Buckley and Councillor Garthwaite and Councillor Thompson.
Okay, right, I will note that. So I'll start with the opening remarks that I need to say, and then we'll do introductions. So hello everybody, welcome to this meeting. My name is Councillor Katie Dye and I will be chairing today's meeting. At this point, I would like to clarify that while this meeting is being webcast live to enable public access, it's not being held as a public meeting in accordance with the Local Government Act 1972. As such, it is a remote consultative meeting of the Climate Emergency Advisory Committee. The consultative status of today's meeting means that some of the usual formalities will not take place at the start of the meeting. This also means that the committee will not be in a position to take any formal decisions, and where necessary, any proposed actions that do require formal ratification will be referred to the next formal public meeting of the committee for approval. Please can I remind members to turn their microphone to mute when they are not speaking and to use the hand raising function to indicate that they would like to speak as we move through the agenda. Thank you very much. So can we start with introductions, and we'll start with Councillor Anderson, please. We can't hear you. I think you don't seem to be muted. Do you want to try again, Councillor Anderson? Nope, still can't hear you.
Let's try that. Can you hear me now?
We can, yes.
Even now, you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Councillor Barry Anderson, Adam Warfield Ward.
Super, thank you very much. Councillor Blackburn.
Councillor David Blackburn, finally in Wortley Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Bowden.
Councillor Jordan Bowden, Roundhay.
Thank you. So we have apologies from Councillor Buckley. So Councillor Carlill.
Hello, Councillor Peter Carlill, Garvin Farsley Ward.
Thank you very much. And I think we did possibly have some late apologies for Councillor Garthwaite, who I can't see on the call. So we'll note apologies there. Councillor Hartbrook.
Hi, Councillor Comrade Hartbrook, Rothwell Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Hayden. No, Councillor Hayden. Okay, Councillor Newton. Councillor Shazad. Okay, and we had apologies from Councillor Thompson, and Councillor Jenkins is here in place.
Hi, I'm Councillor David Jenkins and I represent Killingbeck and Seacroft.
Thank you for joining us, Councillor Jenkins. Councillor Truswell.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Paul Truswell, Councillor for Middleton and Belle Isle.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tudor.
Afternoon, Councillor John Tudor, a trio from Killingbeck and Seacroft Ward today.
And very good to see it. Thank you, Councillor Tudor. And Councillor Wadsworth.
Councillor Paul Wadsworth, Guardian Road and Chair, I need to go at 2:30, so I'll just drop off the call when that time comes.
Okay, thank you for letting us know. Can officers present please introduce themselves, starting with Andrew? Do we have Andrew here?
Yes, Andrew Lingwell from the Council Sustainable Energy and Air Quality team.
Thank you for joining us, Andrew. Rachel?
Yeah, Rachel Wainwright, Policy Officer for Sustainable Energy and Air Quality team.
Thank you, Rachel. Cassie?
I'm Cassie Sivapal and I'm the clerk to this committee.
Thank you very much. And can I also welcome officers who are going to be presenting reports? So do we have Sabi with us?
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you, Councillor. So Sabi Kyra, Highways and Transportation lead on sort of work with the West Yorkshire Mass Transit, work with the Combined Authority.
Thank you very much. And do we have Kevin?
Hi there, good afternoon. It's Kevin Murray speaking. I'm the Interim Director for the Mass Transit Programme in the West Yorkshire Combined Authority.
Thank you very much. And our director for the day is going to be Martin. Do we have Martin with us?
Yeah, good afternoon. Martin Farrington, Director of City Development.
Thank you for joining us, Martin. And looks like we have Gary on the call as well. But we can't hear you. I don't know if you're trying to introduce yourself, Gary. Okay, maybe Gary's with us, but not actually with us in Zoom speak. So we'll pick up with that later. Okay, thank you very much. So we've had apologies from Cassie. Do we have any officer apologies, Cassie?
Polly's away, but that's all as far as I understand.
Okay, super. So that's apologies noted for Polly Cook as well. Fabulous, thank you. So can I move on to declarations of interests? Any members have any interests to declare? Okay, right. In that case, let's move on to the minutes. So if you are able to see the minutes in your pack, we have two sets of minutes to approve today. The first one was from the SEAC meeting of the 28th of November, and that starts on page 7 in your pack. So does anybody have any comments on page 7? Page 8? Page 9? Page 10? And page 11. Okay, so thank you. We'll take those as approved. And then we also had a meeting specifically to look at the report, which was on the 12th of December. So that is on page 5. Any comments on page 5? And page 6? Okay, thank you very much. So we'll take those as approved. And we're going to have a slight switch in the order of the agenda because Martin, who is our director for the meeting, can't stay for the full meeting. So I've suggested that he comes next and then we can move things around after that. And I know Gary's now with us, so thank you. You're welcome, Gary. So Martin, did you want to start?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There are some slides which I think are going to be loaded. I'm going to go.
That's myself. I'll load those for you, Martin.
Yeah. Okay then, Rachel. So what I'm proposed to do, and I think you've allowed about 45 minutes for this, Chair.
Yeah.
So I was going to do about 15, 20 minutes myself. City Development's a broad church, so I'll try and pick out highlights from across the services that we provide, and then that creates the opportunity for questions from there. Are we loaded now?
I just need it's just saying that the host has not enabled sharing screen, so I don't know if that's Cassie, if that would be, if possibly, can you activate that for me, please?
Sorry, I'm not the host anymore. Let me just see if I can.
Okay.
Just a second, sorry.
Sorry, just waiting for the technology.
Looks like your host now, Rachel.
Does, yes. No problem, thank you. Sorry about this. I'm just getting it to the point where it'll obviously be a bit bigger for yourselves. It's just.
Okay.
Super, thank you.
Yeah, so if we can just move it on to a couple of slides. Yeah, so I'm going to do culture and economic development first. In terms of the economic development focus, the inclusive growth strategy, which was approved in 2018, is being refreshed in 2023, and addressing the climate emergency will be upfront across that strategy. You may recall that the head of economic policy attended this committee on the 28th of November last year to provide an overview of this work and take feedback. So the refreshed strategy is expected to go forward to executive board approval in summer of 2023, and climate change and mitigation strategies and supporting our ambitions for 2030 will be a key focus in that. In terms of the innovation vision, members may be aware that we've developed our proposals around an innovation arc. We're bringing forward a supplementary planning document to support that currently, which has been subject to consultation. And again, the city's innovation vision to stimulate innovation, which drives and delivers measurable impact towards a healthier, greener and inclusive future for Leeds, is a key element. We are collaborating with partners across the city to create an ecosystem to support entrepreneurs. And very much this is aligned to the government's most recently announced proposals regarding investment zones in the Chancellor's autumn statement, where it talked about innovation clusters as a departure from the initial investment zones proposition. So I think as we develop our response to that call when it comes out during the course of this year, being able to step up to the plate on that and be ready, but particularly with regard to innovation that is complementary to our actions on climate change, will be key. And then finally there, we talk about destination marketing and our international relations plan, which is approved by Executive Board in October 2022, which sets out how the city will drive sustainable tourism. Key things here is about longer dwell times, encouraging the use of local independence in the supply chain, as well as sustainable travel across the city, engaging with the hotel and venue sector with an aligned net zero agenda. The service is working with partners across the city, including the hotel sector, visitor attractions and Leeds 2023 to deliver green tourism accreditation as a city by the end of 2025. Next slide, please. Yeah, so in terms of the future talent plan, this was launched in September 22 as a future talent and plan with inclusive growth in Leeds. The plan was developed and is owned by stakeholders in the city. In particular, we're working with the combined authority and other local authorities to develop gain share funded programme to help support unemployed people into green jobs as part of the mayoral pledge. We're collaborating with Leeds City College, Leeds College of Building, Leeds City Council Sustainable Energy Units, businesses and the combined authority and skill providers to develop skills provision in the city. We're working with the AHEAD partnership to promote careers in green energy and low carbon sectors across schools. In terms of the combined authorities Green Skills Task Force, we're a member of that, which is looking to take forward the regional recommendations to support engagement and inspiration of skills for the green economy, retention and the creation of workforce skills, the need for information about growth and declining access to training. And then finally, developing employment and skills green skills plan to support the transition to net zero by 2030 is a key piece of work for us, and how we adapt to climate change. This plan will take forward the priorities of our actions from 2023. Next slide, please. And then on the cultural side, in terms of Leeds 2023, I've highlighted there Sustainable Arts in Leeds, SAIL is the acronym, which is a not-for-profit member network supporting cultural and creative industries across Leeds to realise an ambition for a zero emissions, zero waste sector. It's enabled by ourselves through council funding, and SAIL formed in 2018 as a response to the rising climate crisis. SAIL membership now totals more than 90 creative organisations. So as well as monitoring progress of a sustainable action plan over the lifetime of the Year of Culture for 2023, Leeds 2023 is developing exemplar projects which champion sustainable practices, making them industry leaders in their approach, such as groundbreaking sustainable music festival to take place in the summer, as well ensuring that events and projects are sustainable in 2023. It'll explore the theme of climate change and sustainability throughout the programme, influencing education audiences about the effects of climate change and exchanging best practice internationally with partnerships such as Lille 3000, Eurocities and international arts organisations. At the bottom there, I talk about the major events framework approved by Executive Board in December 2021, which sets out our commitment to ensuring all major events contribute to the city's ambition to become net zero by 2023. So in 2022, we worked with the British Triathlon Association to deliver the first ever World Triathlon event to achieve the gold certification of sustainability by World Triathlon. And the service also managed to specify managed a specific sustainability subgroup for the delivery of the Rugby League World Cup, which took place towards the end of last year. And the framework also sets out our intention to engage with our colleagues in sustainable energy and air quality team, seek the support from the University of Leeds Sustainability Research Institute, and all event organisers to adopt the guidelines, which will include such areas as event planning, transport, travel and suppliers. Next slide, please. So on planning and sustainable development, when I had the pre-brief, I agreed that I wouldn't talk too much about planning and sustainable development because my understanding is you've had detailed presentations on the area of planning quite recently. I think the two areas that I would simply highlight is around the Leeds local plan going to 2040. Local update 1, your city, your neighbourhood, your planet has looked at the climate change policies and how they need to be updated for 2040. And we've been out to consultation on that. So that's obviously a key piece of work in the context of this committee. And then local update 2. Where we're looking to go forward to Executive Board in February and consult in later February and throughout March on the scope of the local update 2. That will include potentially looking at the spatial strategy for the city, our approach to housing, our approach to economic development, the role of district centres, and in particular that will bring out important issues around 20-minute neighbourhoods, minerals and waste and how we manage for that going forward to 2040, and also transport. So there's some key elements there in the local plan update 2, which will have a particular relevance to the work of this committee. Next slide, please. So in terms of asset management and regeneration, I was just planning to focus and highlight 2 areas of work. Next slide. The first is the development of our places strategy, which was adopted by the council in March 2020 as a vision for how we enhance the public realm in the city centre, and how that has moved forward at some pace in terms of the delivery of projects. So we have, working across the directorate, delivered Playhouse Gardens, and you see a visual of a CGI of how it's proposed there. That was concluded in 2019. We've concluded our work on Meadow Lane, which is the gateway to Ayr Park, which is currently on site being brought forward by Vastint. We've concluded our work on Corn Exchange, Cookridge Street, Sovereign Square with the David Oluwale Bridge opening later this week, as a series of interventions which enhances the greening of the city centre. And then the second area is in relation to housing growth. Next slide, please. Where we have an ambition and a pipeline to deliver about 1,200 new social houses across the city. And here, this service came into the directorate about 2 years ago. And one of the first tasks that we undertook was to look at the specification of new build of those houses across a whole series of measures of that specification, including their energy performance. What you've got on the top slide there is newly completed properties at Tarndale and Mardale, which is a development of some 41 new homes, and they have achieved an EPC score of 86, which gives an EPC rating of B and an air tightness score of just below 3. And what we've done in terms of enhancing that specification, we took the policy decision not to install any gas boilers in new builds. And so Healy Croft at Tingley, which was recently completed in the picture below, uses ground source heat pumps and solar PVs. That has an EPC rating of A. And that's then building all the time and looking at, we're currently looking at going on site at Amberton Court for Gipton, and that will have air source heat pumps as the technology that we intend to use there. So looking to move that forward in an upward trajectory in terms of the environmental performance of those new houses. And then highways and transportation. There's a range of issues that I'll quickly go through here. Next slide, please. So I'll talk about the establishment of new governance arrangements, headline overview of the Connecting Leeds transport strategy, and then our approach to capital investment and innovation and success. So next slide. So I think it's fair to say that highways and transportation have really gripped this issue in terms of establishing a climate emergency task group that meets every weeks, the aim of reviewing and developing our actions to deliver our pledge in terms of climate change. And particular, it's a focus on 3 pillars. People, so how through amending our working practices we can reduce carbon impact. Projects, so ensuring our policies, strategies and designs promote zero low carbon outcomes such as travel choices and embedded carbon. And then the supply chain, ensuring that through our contracts we promote designs, construction methods and materials that minimize carbon impacts. And climate adaptation plan is also within there. So the council-wide workshops supported follow-up work in highways and transportation, which is planned for early 2023. So next slide. So when we look at the Connecting Leeds transport strategy, which we brought forward for approval last year, that's based on the vision of Leeds to be a city where you don't need a car, where everyone has an affordable, accessible, zero carbon choice in how they travel, and then centered on the 3 pillars of the council's overarching strategic approach of tackling climate change, delivering inclusive growth, and improving health and well-being. And with specific respect to tackling climate change, to decarbonise our transport and create healthier street spaces and communities. So those are the key areas. The next slide. And when we look at what that means in terms of behavioural change, this slide intends just to highlight what that means. So on the right-hand side, you've got by 2030 how trips need to be in terms of the modal split. So 30% walking, 4% cycling, 22% public transport, 2% other, and 41% by private car. And then on the left-hand side, you see what that means in terms of changes. So a 33% increase in walking, 120% increase in public transport, and a 30% decrease, sorry, in private car. And then next slide. And what this slide shows is one of the key elements in the strategy, which is if we carried on with the as is pre the strategy, you have the green line. The measures that include a series of local and sub-regional measures between ourselves and the combined authority gives you the trajectory of what we can bring forward on the blue line. But there you have the orange line, which says where we need to get to in terms of a linear trajectory by 2030. And that's really where there's the gap in terms of probably looking for national policy outside of the actions that we could take locally to drive that down to that target. So there's a real issue there that we outline more fully in the Connecting Leeds strategy. So then we go in terms of the investment programme. Next slide, please. And particularly the Leeds Public Transport Improvement Programme and the full benefits, which has delivered 5 key transport corridors, introduced 1,785 new park and ride spaces, improved public spaces, as I picked up earlier, the delivery of 7 neighbourhood transport hubs, and improvements to Leeds bus station and improvements to 990 bus stops. So taken collectively, that £175 million programme improved air quality and reduced carbon emissions. The programme-wide and predicted reduction as a result of modal shift is 23,443 tonnes of CO2 over 60 years. That's the equivalent of moving 30.4 million car trips. And then at the bottom there, you've got Sturton Park and Ride, which was one of the larger schemes delivered through this programme. It's the UK's first fully solar-powered park and ride, offsetting 800 tonnes of carbon each year, provides 1,200 spaces and an active travel hub. It's served by a fleet of electric buses with 30 EV charging bays, and there was a tree replacement as part of the development at a ratio of 54:1. Next slide, please. And then through the delivery of large programmes such as this, one of the key aspects that the service has sought to undertake is undertake pilots to say, how can we drive down carbon in the delivery of our projects, both in terms of the operation of delivering those projects and in the embodied carbon that's delivered. So key large capital schemes where we've piloted that, one is the East Leeds orbital, where over 500,000 of cubic meters of material was excavated, but 98% of waste diverted from landfill by being reused or recycled. Road planings were recycled to be used in cycle route footways, saving £200,000. EcoNet site cabins were used, saving more than 500 tonnes of CO2 every year, and replaces 248 removed trees with 35,235 new trees, and has a 50-mile-an-hour speed limit to reduce emissions. And then another large capital scheme that we've got undergoing currently, where we've undertaken a carbon reduction approach, is the Flood Alleviation Scheme 2, which we set ourselves a target of reducing carbon emissions from the use of materials by 20% and energy use by 10% compared to what would be the normal delivery in the baseline figure. This saving is the equivalent of approximately 3,700 tonnes of carbon, and examples of the kind of measures we've brought forward is utilising clay from local fields rather than importing them from further away. That saved 5,000 wagon loads of material being transported from elsewhere. And I think really on both of those two, through the delivery of those projects, we've tried to elevate the management of carbon to sit alongside the management of the finance and budgets. And I think that has led to demonstrable reductions in carbon through those approaches being adopted. Next slide, please. And then in terms of flood alleviation scheme 2, that is a key measure in terms of the resilience of the city and its ability to withstand a flood along the air corridor. The scheme delivers 1 in 200 year protection, and it is the largest natural flood management scheme in terms of the upper catchment works ever attempted in the UK. So it has a national profile in that sense, as well as being on the government's major projects programme as one of the key projects in the UK. And as part of that, significant amounts of hedgerow planting, aeration, peatland restoration and tree planting. Currently, we have some 412,000 trees have been planted up to this planting season, and the profile of planting for this winter is a further 100,000 trees in the upper catchment, which aims to maximise the amount of resilience through natural flood management in the upper catchment to minimise the amount of hard-edged engineering we have to do along the urban corridor of the River Aire. So that's final slide, please. That's a quick canter through quite a wide range of actions that we take across the directorate, but happy to take any questions, and if I can't answer them because of the detail, I'll make sure I can provide a written answer, Councillor Dye. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin. You've showcased a huge amount of work that's going on across so many different areas, so really appreciative of that. It's really good to see the management of carbon being at the forefront as well. But as you said when you showed us your graph, we still have an enormous way to go. Can I open up for questions or comments, please? Do you want to raise your electronic hand? Okay, thank you very much. Let's start with Councillor Truswell.
Thanks very much, Chair. And Martin, thanks very much for that comprehensive overview of the work that's been undertaken. Two questions, really. You told us about the massive carbon reducing impact of the schemes, the big ticket schemes like ELAR and flood management. But how far are we cascading that right down the supply chain and the contractor chain to the lowest level? How far is it permeating the whole system? And my second question relates to buildings, and you gave us some very interesting information about how new build social housing is having heat pumps installed, presumably with the commensurate insulation and draft proofing. But what about other buildings that fall within the remit of city development, both as a service provider and as a landlord?
Do you want to come back on those two, please, Martin?
Yeah, no, I can do. I mean, in terms of supply chain, there is a lot of work that now takes place within highways and transportation on supply chain, Councillor Truswell. And what we've tried to do is use those 2 pilots of those big capital projects to mainstream that activity within the directorate. I don't know whether Gary's on, whether he wanted to provide any more detail on that, Gary.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Hopefully you can hear me. We have a series of frameworks, contractual frameworks that we're setting up, and the idea of that is to help make sure that these impacts and these changes are embedded in all the contracts that we let. So it's not just the big schemes, it is also the day-to-day, if you like, for example, highways maintenance contracts that we will let as well. The contractors must have regard for what they're doing. I'm not saying it's there's still a lot of work to do in this area, but hopefully you can see from the slides and the evidence that's been provided that we're on that path, and we are keen to explore this under the governance arrangements that Martin covered off in his one of the first slides for highways and transportation.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. And then in terms of the other buildings, Councillor Truswell, I think the main area there that we've moved forward with was something that we did in terms of working with Polly and her team, was about having this position where the baseline for works to council buildings, and certainly new build, but also when you're doing major refurbishments, is to achieve BREEAM excellent in terms of the performance, and you have to opt out rather than it was more of an opt-in culture perhaps before. So opting out is because there's a clear and justifiable reason why, because of the nature of that building, it's not appropriate to try and achieve BREEAM excellent. But we sort of changed the dial to make that the opt-out culture rather than opt-in, and that means that in terms of those works, there's a higher level of achievement of BREEAM excellent across the council's portfolio, as well as that being a requirement in planning in terms of large-scale new build now as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Martin. Councillor Trustwell, did you want to come back on that?
Just briefly, the sorts of buildings that now fall within city developments, of course, include leisure centres, and clearly where there are swimming pools and heating issues. I just wondered what steps we're taking to mitigate the carbon production from those buildings.
Yeah, so we're working very closely with Polly's team, and so one of the examples of what's been done was the installation of solar at John Charles, where we have the 50-metre pool, and what that did was it took the carbon away from the delivery of. It's not cheaper to the council in financial terms, but it does take the carbon out in terms of how that energy is delivered. So there's those kind of works that we do. In some instances, because of the age of the building, there's only so much you can do, and really you need to be looking at new build. And so, you know, for example, Fernville is one of those cases where the council's intention is to seek to bring forward a new build for Fernville. And because of the scale of that building, there's a new build design. That's where we'd look for that to achieve BREEAM excellent and make that step change in terms of the performance of the building. There's probably two strategies there, Councillor Trustwell: enhancing what we've got where we can, but recognising that in some instances it's about a new build proposition.
Okay, thanks, Marty. So there's no programme for other leisure centres as such?
There will be ongoing works to enhance the estate. I can provide a note for that, Councillor Dye, if it helps.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Would that be helpful, Councillor Trustwell? Yes, okay. Yeah, that'd be good then. Thank you, please, if you can do that, Martin. Okay, happy to on Councillor Trustwell. Sorry, I muted myself. I said, are you happy to move on?
Yes, Chair, of course. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so let's move to Councillor Tudor.
Hi. So yes, I recognise the new build house on Tarnside there. I think we might have been in that one. 41 properties on that piece of land. Fantastic. They are as well. I got excited about the figure. I think you said 1,200 planned, and I wondered what the time scale for that lovely big figure of 1,200 was. And part two, just be really interested in a bit more detail about the city centre greening, whether that's provided later or now. Thank you.
Okay, Martin.
Yeah, the 1,200 is over a 5-year timescale, Councillor Tudor. Some of which, a lot of I can send you the detail. It's set out, and it's something that we report on in terms of number of developments that are on site. And you mentioned there that you've been to the Tarndale site. I was there myself a few weeks ago as well. And we've got a big site, as Councillor Trustwell will know, in Middleton that's currently on site. We've got a much larger volume of properties in the pipeline in terms of going through planning and tendering, and probably that's where Amberton's is at the front of that queue in terms of getting onto site, and then a series of other properties and scheme proposals that are in feasibility. So that's, I can again, Councillor Dye, I can send the schedule of that. We've got it to hand. It's no problem. We can share it amongst members. And then in terms of the greening of the city, I suppose from a development perspective, I'm always mindful that development is an exercise in dynamic patience. And we had city centre conferences in 2008 and 2009, which highlighted the issue of green space in the city centre. And I did a piece of work on that as a much younger man. And really what you identified through that was There was a lack at that time of quality of green space. There was a lack of quantity of green space, and I was searching for the third Q, but I couldn't find it because it's the lack of distribution. Because the more you went south, you found that there was no green space at all. So the works we've undertaken over the past 15 years has been a strategic response, really, to try and rectify that by bringing forward green space proposals like Sovereign Square, working with Vastint as the developers of the Carlsberg Tetley site to introduce that new city centre park, which is about 4.5 hectares and will have about 500 new trees in terms of a new gateway into the southern entrance of the city, with the David Olawale Bridge making that really important connection. And then looking at and just interrogating how the city planned itself and laid itself out, where there was areas of land where you'd say, could it be put to better use? So, for example, Cookridge Street, somewhere that I walk past every day on the way to and from the station, did it need to be a part of the highway network as it was, or could it actually create a better city centre environment by having a set piece of public realm there outside the Radisson? And that's what we've brought forward. That's why we've enhanced the setting outside of the Corn Exchange as a Grade 1 listed building that was previously over-dominated by a series of low-grade bus stops, but now sort of shows the building in terms of the kind of setting you'd expect for a Grade 1 listed building. And just small interventions. If you look on Woodhouse Lane and coming down to the Merrion House from the Woodhouse Lane car park, there used to be a slip road there. And that was very much from a sort of a 1960s, 1970s design philosophy of facilitating the car to move at a certain speed through the city. And actually that slip road wasn't needed. We took the tunnel away, we took the slip road away, we put a piece of public realm there, and cars now simply approach traffic lights and take a hard left at that junction. But it really sort of helps to add green interventions into the city. So there's a whole scale of work that's taken place there, the Councillor Tudor, that I've just tried to summarise quickly, but I hope that's helpful to you.
Did you want to come back on that, Councillor Tudor?
That's brilliant. Thank you. I was originally just thinking about what types of trees and plants and so on, but a very comprehensive answer.
I used to leave that to Councillor Nash.
Thank you very much. Okay, so moving on, Councillor Hartbrook is next.
Thank you, Chair. Martin, thanks for a very comprehensive and quite a wide-ranging presentation. And just picking up one comment, actually, you mentioned around the kind of the work we're doing with further education colleges in terms of training, and that is really key. I mean, to give you an example, my local plumber who does my services my still moderately modern gas combi boiler, I was chatting to him about it because we're looking at potentially going air source heat pump and going to a storage water vessel. And I said, I just out of curiosity asked him, are you working on that? And he said, no. This is a guy who's, I think he's about 35, 36, who's listening to this and is 26, he's going to kill me. He said, no, it's just because, to be honest, gas boilers are going to be around for the next 20 years and that will see me out. But it did highlight the fact that we rapidly need the next generation of or retrained fitters for solar panels, air source heat pumps, retrofit heating systems. There's a lot of tech change coming through, and we need the skills, and we're going to need an awful lot of them in the next sort of 5-10 years as demand grows and the products come along. So that was just an observation. One thing that was on your slides that I picked up on, and you talked about, we do clearly need to get down our, city's carbon footprint. There was one thing in there which sort of stuck with me, which was consider charging measures to reduce demand for travel. And, I think keeping this sort of top line, I worry when I see things like that, because ultimately charging and adding costs in disadvantages disproportionately the poorer in our society. It's not the guy in the 4x4 Volvo that kind of won't drive or use. They'll pay whatever parking. I mean, I was up in Edinburgh when my daughter's at uni, and they charge £5 an hour to park on streets a couple of miles from the centre. And guess what? The parks are full. So it's not a pricing issue for that. All it does is it hurts the people who need access to city, and in a city such as ours, where outside of certain core routes, bus transport still has some way to go. But and this isn't the group for discussing that. We really need to get the options stood up that are the carrots before we go in with the sticks, because at the moment, my caseload is full of people saying, we're developing a reputation as a city as being anti-car, and that's great, but you need to have the options there for people to use as an alternative. But I'll dwell on that. One other thing that I'd like to have seen in the presentation that wasn't, which is a really, really positive way of taking people away from car use, is 15-minute neighbourhoods. Again, a lot of the plans are very, very city centre focused, and our city centre is beautiful. I honestly think it's one of the best in the Northern Hemisphere. There are very, very few city centres that I love as much as Leeds in the variety of architecture, but that should be alongside having good localities and good travel around those localities, which I think is something that we need to see. And I think I know the next agenda item in terms of mass transport touches on that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I mean, in terms of perhaps the 20-minute neighbourhood, I'll address that first. It's something I touched on as one of the areas in the local plan 2 update that's coming forward to Executive Board. So there's a live issue there of recognising that the future district centres and then how we achieve that 20-minute neighbourhood ambition is key for us going forward to the plan in 2040, or leading up to takes us to 2040, and that it's the consultation that will be undertaken in late February and through March, where I think there's an opportunity to engage on that one to help develop that policy going forward further. In terms of demand management issues, I think you make a fair point in terms of carrot and stick. I know Councillor Hayden has put her hand up. I didn't know whether it was on this point that she wanted to comment, Chair.
Yep, I was going to bring her in after you, but now seems like a good point if you want to come in. Welcome, Councillor Hayden. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I've had terrible IT problems, so Zoom kept throwing me out. So, but I did. I mean, I'm aware, but on that spot particularly, and Martin's absolutely right. That's what I wanted to talk about, because it is more of a political kind of ask, and a more political kind of approach to this thing. I mean, there will be people who will accuse us of being anti-car. I mean, the strategy is Leeds to be a place where you don't need a car, and that will benefit the poorest the most, because they don't have cars at the moment. Only 35% of people in the recreations have a car, yet they suffer much more, 5 times more from air quality related illnesses. So not anti-car. It's not where you shouldn't have a car, it's where you don't need a car. But there will be people feeling threatened by the fact that they're not, there's certain places close to them. And the routes have changed, and what they've traditionally done for 20, 30, 40 years is not the same anymore. And change is difficult. And but in the end, it's the right thing to do, especially if we want to get those figures that Martin talked about, and the particular reduction in the private car use. Sorry. On the point about charging, we have to keep everything in our arsenal, and there's going to be a lot of carrot. I don't want to bring in any more charging than there is at the moment. But that's not to say that you don't have it in your arsenal. You have, if all the things we're doing in terms of trying to improve access to public transport and the public transport itself, and times and reliability, and then cycleways and encouraging active and travel and making it safer. If all those in the end don't work, you have to have something in your back pocket to really kind of be the silver bullet, I suppose, or to kind of really move things along. But I'll let Martin come back there. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen.
Is there anything else that you're looking for me to add? Sorry.
No, it was good to hear that the 15/20 minute neighbourhoods. So it depends out. I don't know if they're the same thing. It just depends how fast you cycle. But it's good to hear that they're in scope, because whether it be Rothwell where I live, or Crossgates, or Chapel Allerton, or areas of Beeston or Adel, we've got some really good. I'm sorry that kind of swayed around my side of the city, but that's just where my head goes. We've got some really good civic centres in our area, and I think they need to be kept vibrant. Otherwise, they'll kind of wither on the vine. And I think our city as a centre continues to prosper. The building and the growth. I mean, you go there, the number of cranes, but I think that as a city, we need to kind of, as well as that seems like it's kind of got the critical mass, a bit like a fusion reactor, it's going. But the outer lying areas, we need that love and attention as well, because I know a lot of my family, friends, residents rely on what they can get to on their doorstep, and having good facilities close by is one of the most environmentally friendly things you can do, because it removes the need for any transport whatsoever.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carlisle, did I see a hand be raised and then lowered?
I was going to come in. I guess I'll come in with a point anyway. I was just thinking of the points Conrad raised and Helen came to as well, because it's interesting we've got these two things together, that we've got Martin around the transport strategy and then the mass transit, because obviously what has always reflected in my mind is, one, mass transit something that we're sorely missing and we'll make a good move towards it. But from when I've looked around, so I obviously have a responsibility for trying to bring improvements to the bus transport across West Yorkshire, which is proving incredibly difficult due to the fact of how bus companies happen to be arranged, as well as where the funding's coming from and the struggles they're having from the pandemic. But what I've seen from other cities is those that have tram systems actually can make an income off the tram system and are able to fund that into improving public transport. And that's one other way that Leeds finds itself let down in a way. So due to that, we don't have the funding that Manchester may have that they could then spend on improving public transport. And I think that's one of the big struggles that we face on that. So public transport is there paid purely by what the government decide to pay for it and what passengers pay. But if you end up taking control of that fare box, you can obviously decide what you do with that money. And unfortunately, we don't have that due to we don't have a mass transit system. It's just, I guess, a bit of a problem, because the mass transit system isn't going to turn up until beyond our climate emergency deadline. And that's where you have to try and square that circle.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for those points. I would imagine that would flow nicely into the agenda item that we've got on mass transit. So we've got Sabby and Kevin who can pick up on that with us later on in the meeting. Anybody else got any more questions? Councillor Hartbrook, is that a hand remaining from the previous question? Yes, it is. It's gone. Anybody else got any more questions for Martin? Okay. So just looking at the notes that I made, Martin, during your presentation, a lot of the things that I wanted to discuss have been covered. And I certainly don't want to spend a lot of time recovering them, particularly because I'm conscious of your time. Just a point about the green skills and jobs, and I know you mentioned the research about that the Head Partnership have been doing. One of the things that came out of that was that there was quite a lack of knowledge among young people about what these jobs and skills were. So it's not really a question, it's just to say that that's a really important point going forward for the future, the work with schools and colleges to make sure that young people are fully informed, and then they can make the right choices about kind of careers and further training and everything else really, apart from the huge gap to net zero, which is something that keeps me awake at night. has been covered in further questions. So I think we can leave that item there with a couple of actions for you, Martin, to provide briefing note on leisure centres and the schedule for house building, if you could. And the huge gap, I think, is something that's a big action for us to be working on going forward. So thank you very much. Thank you for attending. You are free to go, and we've given you 3 minutes ahead of the time you said you could stay with us, so use it wisely. Thank you very much. Gary, I don't know whether you were wanting to stay on or...
Chair, if it's all right with you, I'll stay on and listen to Kevin and Sabi for a little while, but I need to chair a meeting at 2:30, so I will go at that point.
Yeah, of course, you're very welcome. Thank you very much. Okay, so moving on in the agenda then, the next thing that we're going to go to is our open forum. We have 2 submissions this week, and I understand, Rachel, you're going to read out the submissions because the people who've sent them in are not able to attend. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes. So I'll start with, I believe the first one's Stephen Rowe, who's a resident. So if I'm okay to start with that one, Chair, and then the second one is obviously some text over a soundless video in a sense.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. So I was reading on behalf of Stephen Rowe, who's a resident. His submission is, I recently came to a planning committee meeting to object to the council allowing a construction company to withdraw the offer of placing a corner shop on a development and instead turning the space into additional flats. What is highlighted for me, and I think some of the councillors at the meeting, was that there's no environmental considerations around planning applications, or not enough, and that whilst there may be a climate emergency declares, it's not permeated far enough throughout the council to be significant enough to make a difference. My objections to the withdrawal of the corner shop was on the basis that by installing such a shop to cater for 1,000+ dwellings, this would reduce the residents in the surrounding areas, making car journeys to shops elsewhere. Short car journeys are the worst in terms of polluting the environment and causing health issues to the drivers of the cars involved. Whilst the planning officers alerted us to the location of other shops nearby, the nature of going shopping these days means most people drive to shops and only people who don't own cars don't drive to the shops. Surely planning can also look at common human behaviour and factor in that 80% of people have a car. Cars create a dependency which needs subtle interference to remove people from. By creating a corner shop, thousands of small car journeys a week would be prevented as people instead walked across the estate. Benefits of people just walking in terms of health and the social aspects of neighbours meeting in a focal point also brings a community together aside from the sustainability benefits.
Thank you for that, Rachel. And I think short journeys is something that as SEAC we should be really concerned about. We've heard in Martin's presentation about that as well. And we also heard about the local plan update and the discussion of the 20-minute neighbourhoods that came out of that. So I think that's something that we definitely need to take on board. And I think we have the local plan update as an agenda item for the next infrastructure working group. Is that correct, Rachel?
Yes.
So I think that's something that we should pick up there.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, people in agreement with that? Super, thank you. Do you want to move on to the second one then, Rachel?
I will do. I'm just, obviously that involves sharing a video, so I'm just seeing, have I still got the host right? I just need the screen sharing capacity back again, please, Cassie, if that's possible.
Yeah, just 1 second.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'll have to go to get it again.
It's okay. Thank you. So this is from Susanna Grace, and She is representative of Plastic Free Fields Leeds, who are a group of community campaigners in South and East Leeds. Today, we are asking you to act urgently and demand council leaders abandon their plans for plastic sports pitch developments on Leeds nature sites. The video shows one of the sites with a focus on insects observed there and photographed by the community. The developments are against your climate emergency policy, current biodiversity policies, and the local plan update. They are against the UK's commitment to end plastic pollution through its membership of the High Ambition Coalition. A ban on plastic grass will be included in proposed changes to the MPPF, but the ban will go further. The European Commission will ban rubber crumb sports pitch infill this year with a 6-year transition period for industry. DEFRA has responded by making rubber crumb sports infill and other intentionally added microplastics a top priority for its own REACH programme. DEFRA states, existing concerns relate mainly to environmental risks, but more recent studies suggest there are also risks to human health. The EU ban and similar new UK legislation will see the sale of rubber crumb banned by 2029. The UK sports bodies are aware of this change in direction. The council's proposed rubber crumb pitches only have a 6-year lifespan at most. This is unsustainable development and contrary to the council's core value of spending money wisely. Professor Andrew Watterson is working with the Environment Agency, part of DEFRA, to update the UK legislation. He has leaded the council not to use rubber crumb infill because of the risks. The Environment Agency also supports using the precautionary principle. The council are ignoring sensible advice. Not only are plastic pitches unsustainable, the council are choosing inappropriate sensitive sites already designated for wildlife, greenbelt and parkland. We already use these sites for nature watching close to home and community wellbeing. Scarce meadowland is more valuable left for nature because of the biodiversity crisis. These sites will never recover because of the toxicity of the materials. There are alternatives to plastic pitches, such as improved natural grass ones and alternative brownfield sites. Existing facilities can be shared in line with the circular economy. Plastic pitches increase the risk of serious flooding problems. Soil in green spaces acts as a sponge and slows down the flow of water into drains. 50% of rainfall can run straight off some types of plastic grass. Drains are easily overwhelmed. Rubber crumb particles are microplastics that easily escape into the environment in bad weather. They are also washed down shower drains and dispersed on kits and trainers. Rubber crumb particles are eaten by wildlife, mistaking the crumbs for food, and players also accidentally ingest and inhale the particles. They can also be absorbed through the skin. Dissolved harmful chemicals that leach from rubber crumb and plastics are dispersed into nearby watercourses and soil. This is particularly toxic to aquatic life and earthworms having declined by 1/3 in the UK. Plastic pitches create huge urban heat islands, reducing the quality of the air. Harmful chemicals are also released as a gas during hot weather and breathed in. Players also risk burns and heat-related illness. Plastic grass is much hotter than the natural environment. Green spaces, on the other hand, cool the city. Floodlit pitches cause light pollution, affecting bats, insects, navigating birds and migrating animals. It even changes the foraging behaviour of the hedgehogs and affects plants and trees. Darkness is a resource that must be preserved like other precious natural habitats. Currently, there are no facilities in the UK to recycle pitches. The council are relying on a company to repurpose material, which means it remains in the environment, slowly degrading. As it degrades, it causes even more plastic and chemical pollution. Some pitch waste is sent to less developed countries, so its disposal can become their problem. We want you to support the Global Plastics Treaty and protect our precious green spaces and communities from plastic and chemical pollution. Climate emergency is the priority, not shareholders of the artificial turf industry and plastics industry. It's just about 30 seconds of this video remaining, Chair.
Sorry, I was muted then. I said I'll wait for the video to finish, Rachel.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that submission, and thank you for taking time to prepare a video to go with it. I have to say I understand concerns, particularly about rubber crumb infill. It's something that we should as a committee be concerned about. And the reference to the DEFRA work, I know that DEFRA and Public Health England are working with Sport England to look at this issue. Can I recommend that SEAC raises our concerns about the use of rubber crumb infill? Are people in agreement with that? Can we do that, Rachel? Can we raise our concerns with Sport England about that?
That's fine, yeah.
Super. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Can we move on then to working group updates? Okay, so just checking which ones we have. So since the last meeting, the biodiversity, food and waste, infrastructure, planning and buildings, and community and business engagement have all met. Economy and finance hasn't and is due to meet on the 7th of February. So can we go to Councillor Anderson first for a brief, please, update on the biodiversity, food and waste working group?
Chair, I think he's gone. I checked before, I couldn't see Councillor Anderson.
I do believe you're right. Yes, I think he has. Okay, well, tell you what, we'll do the other two, and then if he appears again, then we can come back to him. Okay. So the first one was infrastructure, planning and buildings, which I chair. And at the last meeting, we had an update on the net zero housing plan. So we talked about the Combined Authority Better Homes Hub and the retrofit hub. We had a conversation about how to engage people. We discussed the fact that there are plans to produce an interactive map of different areas of the city and where different work has been done, which we thought was really quite an interesting thing that might help engage people if it was made public and people could access their area and see what work's being done and what might be appropriate for their type of house. We talked about the scaling up of the area approach, for example, the Holbeck work. And then we also mentioned the local plan update, and we also discussed green jobs. So two things that seem to be getting quite a lot of coverage through SEAC at the minute. We also talked about the idea of improving boiler standards. Rachel introduced us to a new governmental proposal which looks at the idea of phasing out gas boilers and potential hydrogen ready boilers. And we agreed that Rachel was going to prepare as a briefing note on that because it was quite a chunky document, and then we would come back to discuss that in the next working group in March. And the last thing we looked at was the Eco Plus government scheme, which is geared towards lower cost measures in terms of improving houses in terms of their energy efficiency. It's due to start in April. It's going to be administered by the energy companies, but one thing that we took away as an action was that we, when it comes out, could promote that in our wards and just make sure that everybody who was eligible was aware of that scheme. So that's about it from that working group. Councillor Bowden, did you have a hand up to comment?
Yeah, it's just in regards to what you talked about an interactive map, because funny enough, as Martin was speaking before and talking about Air Park, I just typed it on Google, and Leeds Live did an article in 2019, and it's actually linked to Google Maps, and I've literally just been spending a couple of time looking at it, and it's all completely updated from like even developments a months ago. So it kind of works through Google Maps, and it highlights all the areas where there's development taking place, and it color codes it to like what's been submitted, what's in development, and what's been completed. I mean, I could share the link on here, but it was actually quite interesting I mean, it goes all the way from in the city centre all the way kind of through Leeds, actually.
That would be really interesting. Yes,
Yeah,
please.
I
Yeah.
don't know who's done it. I don't know. I'm not sure who's actually taken control of it. But like I said, Leeds Live had shared it in 2019, and it's still completely up to date. It's showing, you know, recent developments that have just been submitted. So I'll share it. I'll share it in the comment section.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, so the other group that met was the Community and Business Engagement Working Group, which is chaired by Councillor Shazad, who wasn't well. It's good to see you with us, Councillor Shazad. Thank you for joining us. Hope you're feeling a little bit better. So I chaired that at the last meeting, and the focus was on engaging businesses so that we could look at ways that they could be supported with climate action, and that they could be made aware of the support that's available. And we had a presentation from WICA on the support that was available. We looked at a number of schemes, which I won't go into detail with because they're coming to an end. But there is ongoing support available for sustainable and active travel. And there's going to be a new scheme starting in April, which will be aimed at smaller businesses to help them work on their net zero plans and climate ready plans, which is something that I think is definitely worth us all having sight of. We discussed how we could promote that. That's going to be promoted through various channels that the council has in terms of newsletters and forum and organisations across business community and climate related newsletters and channels. But when that comes out, I think that's something that we should be aware of as a group, so that we can share that information with our local businesses, because local businesses need to be able to get themselves on the scheme. And I think it would be a real shame if we had places in our ward that we could promote it to that aren't aware of it. So that's an action that we took away to make sure that we would share that information. So has Councillor Anderson joined us again?
I can't see him, Chair, but I don't know if it'd help in terms of just an overview, because obviously I was present at the biodiversity food and waste group.
That would be super if you can, please.
Yeah, so we last met in December, and the main focus of that particular working group was to discuss circular economy. So we had a couple of guest speakers from Rob Greenland of Zero Waste Leeds, who I'm sure a lot of you will be familiar with through different projects that they've done, especially with the winter coats appeal that they recently did. And then we also had Kat Hyde, who is from Seagulls Reuse on Kirkstall Road. So we had obviously a couple of really good examples of how circular economy is currently in action. And then it was a really strong discussion between everyone in attendance, just talking about what we need to do moving forward as not just a council, but we sort of approached it as like a two-step sort of approach, whereas there's actions that we can take within the council to look at internal, potentially, you know, internal services, how we can work towards circular economy. But then there was also the thing of communication and sort of changing that culture amongst our residents and people that we work with. So moving forward, the takeaway from it was that we were going to look at how moving forward we could look at some of our own services and our own actions within the communities and see where we can start in terms of implementing that. And we'll obviously have an update on that at a future working group.
Brilliant, thank you, Rachel. And it was a really, really interesting discussion. So yeah, thank you for summarising that. Okay, don't see any hands, so let's move on. We're going to our last item of the meeting, which is mass transit. Thank you for your patience, Sabby and Kevin. We're over to you now.
Thank you for that, Chair. Yeah, not a problem. West Yorkshire Mass Transit mentioned a few times actually in this meeting, which is really, really good. So the 14th of December, Exec Board exec board meeting, we had a report for the West Yorkshire Mass Transit Vision 2040, which is a document that the Combined Authority have published, and our response as a City Council went for the statutory consultation period, which finished on the 16th of January. What we're actually going to do now, I'm going to hand over to Kevin, actually, because the Combined Authority are the sole promoter of the West Yorkshire Mass Transit system, and as district partners, we are strategic partners in the work that's progressing. So I'm going to pass over to Kevin, who's going to take us through a short presentation, which will provide us a bit more details. And once we've completed that presentation, happy to take some questions and answers. That's okay.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much.
Okay, over to you, Kevin.
Thanks very much, Savi, and thank you very much, Councillor Dye. I'm going to share the presentation, so I may need, let me just try, so host disabled participant screen sharing. So I think, Cassie, if you're able to let me host and share, that would be really appreciated.
Yeah, just 1 second.
Thanks very much, Cassie. So I'm hoping you can see that okay. Can you see that?
I can't see anything yet.
Nothing at the moment.
Okay, let me just, there we go. That should be it.
That's it, thanks.
That's good,
Excellent.
thank you.
Thanks very much, thank you. Okay, so this is a background briefing really on the current mass transit proposals. It builds largely on the information that's in the Mass Transit Vision 2040 document that we have just concluded another round of consultation on, particularly seeking statutory consultees engagement. So it does draw from that document, and I'm hoping that there'll be some familiarity with colleagues in the panel and the committee with that document, and we can talk about that in some detail. So if I just move us on one. So as background, the Mass Transit Vision 2040 document was also consulted alongside the Connectivity Infrastructure Plan at the same time in 2021. And that gave a good deal of public consultation, public engagement and feedback that in terms of the Mass Transit Vision, we took account of that, updated the Mass Transit Vision 2040 document, and then put that out to a further round of consultation towards the end of last year. That consultation closing just last week. And we're now pulling together a review of the responses we've received from both statutory consultees and public consultees who are invited to participate as well in that second round of consultation. So we will have some specifics, I'm sure, to feedback on from that consultation, and we're just pulling that together just now. But by way of background, the vision, the Mass Transit Vision, is an important document for the Mass Transit Programme. And we use that effectively as our point of reference for the onward development that we're looking at now. So the document itself builds, both documents in fact build on a focus on public good, so looking at people and prosperity, and looking to ensure that there's inclusive aspects to the development proposals, and reaching as far and wide as we can across West Yorkshire. It's an evidence-led approach, and we're looking to build that evidence base as we move forward with the development of the proposals, and the vision's a key document for us in that sense. And we believe it's an ambitious plan for the future, looking to work alongside other public transport modes to strengthen the attractiveness of the public transport network across West Yorkshire. So it recognises the hierarchy that's quite common in terms of public transport priority, walking and cycling First for short journeys, bus and then rail, and this new form of public transport through mass transit featuring in to provide that missing link perhaps between bus and rail. And then it does recognise, of course, there's still retained use of cars and vans as is necessary and appropriate. It also responds to the polycentric nature of West Yorkshire. So the proposal for mass transit, for example, are designed around that polycentric nature. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail as it's described in the mass transit vision. This is a sort of summary statement at the very start about the bold ambition to contribute to making West Yorkshire greener, more inclusive and better connected. And we think that the mass transit proposals allow us to build on that and bring forward a modern world-class public transport system that integrates with other public transport modes. It's another extract from the document. This is our map of the potential mass transit corridors. And there are 9 corridors throughout West Yorkshire, and then Leeds city centre is a location itself that brings together a number of those corridors. So it's a 10th element that's talked about in some detail in the vision document. This is a specific example. There are each of these for each of the 9 corridors and a separate section for Leeds within the mass transit vision document. And it tries to draw out some of that initial evidence base for the need for mass transit fitting within the context of the region itself, the city centres, and then also talks around the potential modes, alternatives for mass transit, because again at this stage we don't specifically state what the mass transit mode will be. We do talk to that in the document, and we've got some further work to develop to bring ourselves to a conclusion on some of that. So here's the potential modes that's mentioned within the mass transit vision document as candidate technologies. So advanced bus rapid transit, light rail or tram, tram train, and potential ultralight rail as another potential solution. And it talks there in general terms about the characteristics and potential benefits, advantages and disadvantages of each of those modes. This is perhaps a key document, key part of the document for us, the 4 key design principles about the mass transit proposals. Importantly, people first, designing for people of all ages and abilities, making sure that the infrastructure is accessible and is reaching across the region to access and provide access to that integrated network to diverse communities and cultures. Inclusive, safe spaces around potential stops, another key area, and making sure that the system comes forward as affordable and accessible to all. And the second pillar, environmental responsibility, perhaps a key area for this particular committee, contributes in part to that net zero ambition and looks to present an attractive alternative to car travel as it builds within that wider public transport network, offering infrastructure that's resilient to climate change, and also infrastructure that promotes biodiversity and seeks to improve through its sustainable development nature to improve air quality and overall health. The third pillar, the better connected, about the integrated nature of the proposals, trying to integrate mass transit with other public transport modes, so bus, active travel and other modes as a complementary system, recognising it has advantages to moving large capacities of people in busy corridors, but also recognising its position in supporting that wider public transport network. Linkage to perhaps new and enhanced park and ride as well, trying to build on that opportunity and that reliability that perhaps mass transit offers in terms of its resilience as a public transport mode. And then finally, the fourth pillar, very importantly, celebrating the uniqueness of West Yorkshire, looking at building upon the particular characteristics of the built-in natural environment throughout West Yorkshire, and in looking to enhance and build on placemaking, and build in that attractiveness of the system. This is also within the document itself, some specific statements about the environmental responsibility that mass transit can bring, its position in looking as a contributory element to the pathway to net zero. So importantly, really, some of the things I've touched on already about the central point being it's a sustainable public transport system. It's looking to build on that high capacity and support in an integrated manner the wider public transport network. And it is looking to enhance and work with the local environment and landscaping and placemaking opportunities, seeking to consider biodiversity and addressing the opportunity to perhaps make accessible and more amenable to the wider communities some of the green spaces and open areas around West Yorkshire. This slide here is a specific slide around the phasing that is proposed within the vision document. So we had proposed phase 1 prioritisation of some routes, and that is described within the mass transit vision document. So it prioritises 4 corridors: Bradford to Leeds, Bradford to Dewsbury, Leeds to Dewsbury, and then Leeds to East Leeds, and then also Leeds City Centre itself as the 5th element. But this also seeks to outline the intention that for the other corridors, there is a rolling programme of development and then subsequent delivery of the subsequent phases all the way through to 2040. This is a specific slide I thought might be of interest around the phase 1 delivery timeline. And this provides a bit more detail than is actually in the mass transit vision document itself. So this outlines some of the key steps that we are now progressing through in the development of the proposals to get ourselves to a point where we can start the main construction activity by 2028, which is the current ambition and commitment in time for the timeline. And in that basis, then we would get the first phase completed and operational by the end of 2031. So there are a number of key steps to make along the way to that. Importantly, the Transport and Works Act order submission in 2025, and then the determination of that by the end of 2026. And supporting that Transport and Works Act order, we are currently working on some development of the concept designs. We are just about to progress the environmental support partner commission that runs alongside that development. And importantly, the business case stages of work, which are now progressing through the strategic outline case, leading into the outline business case that's mentioned here on this particular diagram. And the objective of getting that outline business case available at the beginning of 2025 to support the Transport and Works Act order submission. So that's the key timeline we're working to just now, and we can go into a bit more detail as necessary on that. Any questions? So that was what I wanted to present today. I'm happy to take any questions on that, Chair, if that's okay.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Sabi, is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, that's fine, Chair. I think we're happy to take questions at this stage. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Can we have hands up if anyone has any questions? Thank you. Just reading messages. Thank you for attending, Gary. I don't know if he's already gone, but thank you anyway. Councillor Trustwell, yours is the first hand.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think mass transit in Leeds is one of those aspects of history that has constantly repeated itself. When I was first elected as a councillor, nearly 41 years ago. I think one of the first issues I was looking at was how we got a tram through the centre of Headingley. My question is, how have the initial priority routes been determined? I appreciate there's a rolling programme and that most of the obvious routes are going to be addressed, hopefully, funding permitting, in due course. Because there's always been this sort of dichotomy between those routes that have served communities with low car ownership in order to provide connectivity with work, education, health, shopping, you name it, and addressing those routes that are the most congested in the city and therefore have the greatest environmental impact on inner city residents in terms of air pollution. How have you weighted the various factors that have determined, if you like, your league table and prioritisation of the various routes? Because certainly some of the more polluted and congested routes into the city don't figure in the initial priorities.
Thank you. Do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I think is that for you, Kevin?
Yeah, I can try and answer that actually. I might need to take that away and get a bit more background on it. So the prioritisation was done looking with council district partners actually at what was considered to be the most viable and attractive routes. So I think that was on a broad range of aspects, ranging from, you know, the potential high capacity routes where there was areas of potential high congestion and demand actually for a mass transit type solution. But equally, I think it was also considered where there was the demand for movement between some key city centre nodes and routes, intermediate points along those routes as well. But I'd be happy to take it away and have a look at it in more detail, because it actually probably predates my involvement in joining the team. So if that's helpful for now, I'm happy to do a bit more on that, if that would assist Councillor Trustwell.
Yeah, well, hopefully not assist only myself, but assist other colleagues, not just members of this committee, but right across the piece. I mean, these priorities are not set in stone and are amenable to any changes. That's something that we would want to get to grips with, but we would like to be able, I think, as elected members, to demonstrate how this prioritisation has taken place. Because as I say, I dare say it will throw up some suggestions and some questions as to whether we've got the right priorities. And I think we need the answers to the mechanisms of the process. Could I ask, Chair, with your indulgence, one very quick single sentence answer? Is the intention that this will be a publicly run service?
I'll try and respond to that as well. So we are looking at a number of options to how to fund and finance the delivery of the mass transit proposals for phase one. And that will require us to look at a combination, a likely combination of largely centrally government funded, but also other perhaps contributions that are brought. But I think that all said, we will be looking at a system that is largely publicly run. The reason I've kind of couched it in that way is because we will need to consider areas of potential private investment as well. And there might be specific aspects of the system that we might want to consider as being privately funded and financed.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. I think it's a detailed debate for a later day, but I hope that all members that are on the call at the moment appreciate why I've asked the question. Because the public ownership and control of our public transport system, I think, is something that we're all very keen to see developed.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much for that. Two really important questions there. So, yeah, Kevin, if you're happy to provide further detail on the determination of route priorities, that will be super. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Hartbrook.
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of points from me. I think there are certain radial routes into Leeds and around our cities that nobody would argue benefit, you know, the A64 route from Seacroft and Crossgates through into the Leeds City Centre is much used, and obviously, you know, going round as you go around the city, there are certain key routes which facilitate lots and lots of people every single day getting into our marvelous city centre. One area that I get a lot of feedback that people are frustrated doesn't exist is it's fine having the spokes, but having the rims and the tyre. So basically getting into and out of our city centre is very, very good. Getting around from, you know, for example, you know, going from even from you know, Garforth to Swillington to Rothwell, slightly parochial, but you know, getting around the edges is often problematic. And I think whatever we develop from a mass transit system needs to have supplementary solutions, so that people can kind of get somewhere quickly, you know, so that you're not always kind of having to go do like a cheese wedge. You're not always having to come into the centre and then cut another boot, you know, which might be a almost 20-mile trip for some people, whereas actually if you could go around, it might be a 5-mile trip. So I think that's something to bear in mind. The other thing is, I mean, I think clearly, you know, mass transit systems for Leeds has been an issue which probably predates most of us on this call. So it's a very, very difficult issue, you know. And I think, you know, picking up on the comment around sort of Botley Road going through Headingley, you know, that's to me is a case in point. It's got lots of historic buildings that you would not want to destroy, and what do you do? And the bit that I think is that although we should have had, you know, mass transit systems in years and years ago, and we haven't for whatever reason, I do wonder whether the point for the future is, rather than kind of go down the tarmac route, we go down the telematics route, or the concrete route, we go to connections. I think that if you look at everything that's happening, I wonder whether we're at a smartphone kind of point with transit, where the technology that's coming along means that we could have a technology-led solution where basically smart, flexible, self-driving, smaller vehicles seating 20 or 30 people can react on demand, transiting people around in ways that, you know, for example, food delivery. You know, who would have dreamt up Deliveroo 15 years ago? You know, there are a lot of technologies that are either with us currently, or with a slight push and the support of a city of our magnificence and size could get over the line. And for minimal outlay, because I think that, you know, there are a lot of companies out there, some small, some very, very big, that are working on these. And actually, in many ways, our city, with the unique challenges of hard infrastructure, which is very expensive and disruptive to change, leaves us open to, in some ways, being a very good test bed for developing that. So personally, I would welcome us, rather than going down the traditional, you know, we need tram lines, we need more concrete for bus lanes, looking at more creative solutions which could facilitate people getting around in ways that use, you know, the 5G networks and the telematics, which are pervasive throughout modern life.
Thank you. So two not easy questions to answer there. One, I mean, the point you make on traveling around the city is something that we've revisited many times in many different meetings, and it is a significantly limiting factor. And yeah, future technology. Where are you going with that one, Kevin?
Yeah, really good question. So thank you. So I think the initial one about the radial routes, it's something to take away and consider. I think what we are looking at trying to do is make sure we get the mass transit routing where there is the highest demand, where there's the case for it, and the most viable routing, particularly for the first phase, because I think experience from many other systems is trying to is probably built around getting something established that then develops a basis for success and further expansion. That seems to be a common approach on a number of cities in the UK. So I think what we're trying to do is probably identify those routes within that phase one that are the most attractive, the most viable for delivery in that sort of timeline that we've set out. for 2030 by the end of 2031, which it actually is quite a challenging timeline, I should say. Also, it does seem quite some time away, but to get ourselves through a Transport and Works Act order, the business case accepted and approved, and then all the procurement in place, etc. So I do think the solutioning right now is probably focused around some of those spoke type routes into the centre. But I do think part of the success that we are trying to look at for mass transit is about how it integrates into the wider public transport network. And so truly making those connections with active travel provisions that might allow some of that radial connection, or indeed bus as well, that might allow some of those feeders onto a mass transit line or lines. Might also be a way of broadening the appeal, broadening the catchment, but still actually delivering that sort of step change in public transport mode. But I think all of those things said, we should also still be looking at actually where there's the demand for mass transit. So there may be routes that might be of a radial or semi-radial nature that need considering. So it is about trying to identify those movements, and that's what we're looking at throughout the course of this year. Largely, there's a large piece of modelling work now underway. We've got a large piece of data collection ongoing in the spring, and that model build from there then takes us through the most of this year. So that transport model is a key element for us in building that business case, the outline business case throughout 2024. So I do think we need to look at that more closely and perhaps consider what it's telling us in terms of people's demands for where they want to travel and what sort of modes they want to travel on those routes. So I don't know if that's okay for the first part of that question. The second part about technology is another really interesting part. Again, what we want to make sure we're doing is targeting a solution that is deliverable in the timescales we're talked around, but perhaps certainly is future-proof, to allow ourselves to not only for that particular piece of delivery look at where the technology is, and we are looking to innovate through some of that technology. And so we are looking, for example, at hybrid forms of propulsion. So rather than all being overhead catenary, for example, it may well be battery or a combination of both. And whether it's a guided system on rails or something perhaps more innovative, I think we need to look at that quite closely, where the technology is and how reliable that might be for that sort of delivery timeline, and whether it's achievable within this first phase or subsequent phases. I think we need to make sure that it's future-proof, that we can adapt and move that forward. Perhaps that's the key to it, maybe, rather than trying to go for something that might not be deliverable in the short term, but actually might give ourselves that future flexibility as the system establishes itself within the region. So I don't know if that's helpful, Councillor Hartbrook.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I guess we don't need to specifically answer now, but I think it's something that I think I could imagine a lot of companies out there actively wanting to work with a city like ours in terms of pushing the boundaries on some of those things. So, and you're absolutely right, for every 5 that you throw against the wall, if you get one that actually works its way through to a successful trial, then that's kind of a good result in this kind of environment. I guess the point for me is that a lot of the technologies that are out there, we've moved on from the need of having kind of magnetic lines in the road, or from needing kind of signs that have reference points that LiDAR scanners can look at, etc. And we've moved to a point where the software and the technology is now at the point where it can, certainly on key routes, it can sort of fathom its way around, and it already has the route mapped, and can also kind of look to spot your pedestrians and your cyclists and your cars, and the baby in a pram that's rolled across the road at the last moment, like some kind of horror movie. So the technology really is coming along, but actually the cost of the it's very, 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 very infrastructure light, because all the tech is in the vehicle.
Thank you very much. Possibly one for one of the working groups to follow up. Definitely interested in, I'd be interested in that. So, Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you. Firstly, I just have to say, I mean, we're talking about 2040 here. That's 0 plus 10 years. And basically, this ain't going to be a panacea that's going to rescue us from the situation we're in now. We're going to have to do something about our existing transport system and make sure that delivers in the meantime. But I'm encouraged from some of what I hear regarding this. But one thing I want to know is, are we going to use? I know we haven't got as much redundant infrastructure as we once had, but the problem with our last attempt at this is it went barging through an area without the general support of people in area, and forgot about those areas where former train lines were that we might be able to use as for part of the route. And are we looking at existing infrastructure? I mean, the success of the Manchester tram is because that's how they started theirs. They came at difficult stuff later on. The problem with it was in Leeds. We went and did everything difficult. And I think the other problem which this solves is it was about Leeds, it wasn't about West Yorkshire. And it's got to be about West Yorkshire, because our travelling, well, it's got to be more than West Yorkshire. It's got to be about the city region, really, and deliver on that. The other thing is I think the question will be, does it add up financially? Does it add up with Treasury? While we were going through all the things with Supertram and Supertram Mark II and Trolleybus, I know I went to a series of meetings with a few other people, and the fact was, it was quite obvious that the schemes we were putting through, the Treasury wouldn't let us have the money. I mean, it was obvious from day one, and because they were asking us to deliver, that didn't deliver. So are we on the right lines with doing it? And as I say, and I can, like Paul, I can remember there was a chap called Nils Purser, who was county councillor for Bramley in 1974 when county council just formed, and I remember him doing a presentation. I lived in Bramley then, and I remember him doing a presentation about this rapid transit system that had very much similar routes to what's on this thing, and that was the first time I'd seen anything like that. And since then, we've done a lot of talking about it, a lot of false starts, a lot of times trying to put things in places where people didn't want them to go. And I mean, are we going to get it right this time?
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. Can you pull the questions out of that one and provide some comment on that, Kevin, please?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Dye, and thanks, Councillor Blackburn. So on your first question about are we looking at former railway lines and old infrastructure, the answer is yes, we are. We have route options for each of the corridors that we are working our way through just now. Not every corridor has that available to it, but a number of them do, and we are looking at those sorts of former railway lines as well as sections of on-street running and how we can best try and accommodate a mass transit solution within those types of environment. And so what we're doing right now is developing up potential route options, working them through with our district partners in the various districts that we touch. And then we will go through a process of engaging with councillors and local communities around those solutions to try and establish good support, we hope, for a preferred route. And we are looking at the benefits, disadvantages and benefits of each of the routes as we are trying to bring that information forward. So I think it is a key part of the work stream now. We need to keep at it. There's quite a lot to get through. And what we need to arrive at, I think it's important, is try and keep something that is a deliverable solution whether that's the full extent of the phase one network or parts of it. I think we need to just look at that and look at that with a degree of realism as well around what can be achieved. So that's probably, I don't know if that's sufficient for your first question, Councillor Blackburn. Your second question about making the finances add up, again, a very key part of what we're actively looking at just now through the business case work. Just to let you know, the department and the Treasury as well are alongside us in these proposals. So we believe we've got good engagement, good visibility. We're open and sharing what we're doing with the Department for Transport and the Treasury, and they will be the assurance body that looks at the business case as we bring them forward. So again, we have to get their support. We are going to be seeking a very significant contribution of the funding from central government. So it will be the department and Treasury that will need to look at that, and we'll need to be able to present the best case we can, particularly for that phase one routes in the initial phasing. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be done there. Lots of pressures on money and funding being available. We're aware of that, so we are trying to make sure we're keeping ourselves grounded, but sighted on what needs to be done, and keeping that ambition as high as we can, but still trying to deliver something that's realistic. I don't know, Councillor Blackburn, is that okay for now?
Thank you for that, Kevin. Councillor Trustwell, your hand is up. Is it a new question?
It is a new question, Chair. Whenever we've talked about strategic transport proposals of this type, we've always talked about having an integrated transport system, which, you know, is a bit like religion. It means different things to different people. But I just wonder, obviously the goal is to ensure that all forms of public transport, whether it's new mass transit, whether it's buses and rail, actually complement each other and work together rather than are disaggregated and in competition. And how far is that factored into the process of developing the mass transit schemes, Andrew? Because, you know, we've tried and failed in the past because of different funding mechanisms, different structures, you know, different formats, and I touched upon the need for integration of public transport organisation previously. So, but how far is integrating these systems so that, you know, if I live 2 miles away from a route, I can get on a bus that will take me, if possible, to the nearest place where I can get on the mass transit vehicle, whatever format it might be.
Would you like me to respond to that, Councillor Dye? Yes.
Sorry, yes, I was trying to press the right button.
That's okay. I'm entirely on the same page as yourself, Councillor Trustwell. I mean, I think the success in mass transit will be how it integrates with these other modes, and so we are looking closely, for example, at how we interface and how we best support you know, heavy rail at stations, and how we get that sort of accessibility. But equally, I think with the bus network, that's a real key for us. And I think there's a lot of work for us to do there yet. But I do think what we should be aiming at is a joined up and integrated public transport solution that's built around the mass transit and bus network. I also think we shouldn't take away anything at all from the active travel provisions, and we want to make sure that we are looking at how we best integrate with that too, so that there are good options for people to perhaps, as you've described, you know, make a local journey onto maybe one of the mass transit routes, and then that allows them to have that interchange and complete their journey to where their overall destination is on a, you know, a longer distance basis. I think key to some of that is about the facilities that are there at each of the mass transit stops, and how we make sure there's complementary infrastructure for those sorts of systems. So and not competing systems. But I also think as well, things simple, relatively simple things like ticketing, and that joined up approach to a ticketing solution is another key area for us that we want to look at. So we don't have those details and solutions yet, but we have got them in mind, and it's what we are intending on looking at over the next year or two. That's for sure.
Did you want to come back on that, Councillor Trustwell?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm pressing the wrong button again. I was just about to say, I think they're hugely important questions. You know, both it being really integrated in terms of people's whole journey, but also, yes, the ticketing. You know, that has to be right, doesn't it? It has to be. We talked about affordability, but it has to be easy as well for people to be able to navigate through the system and you know, have a good experience. Andrew, I'm conscious that you've been with us all this time, and I'd like to give you the opportunity to make any contributions. You don't have to, but is there anything you wanted to say?
I don't think I've got anything specific to add, no. Thank you.
Okay, super, thank you very much. Anybody else got any questions? Okay, so can I thank you for that, Sabby and Kevin. I think that's something, it's a huge thing, isn't it, for our area? I mean, the comments I would want to make just before we finish are, one, you mentioned infrastructure, and I guess it kind of fits in with the comments we've had about using new technologies. And the need for it to be resilient to climate change, that will be something that I think is really important. You know, we've already seen temperature rises that have caused chaos to our transport systems, and we're only going to see more of that. So, you know, I think that's something that really needs to be important. And the other thing I would ask about is, you said that there wasn't yet any decision on the actual kind of mode of transport, that's due to be determined. And I think this committee would want to see carbon being a big factor in the decision of what exactly is taken forwards.
That's fine, Councillor. Thank you very much. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what we're about to award is an environmental support contract that supports the development. Part of the work there will look at the environmental, potential environmental impacts and mitigations from the development of a mass transit system. It will equally consider the carbon impact and look at that also, importantly, I guess, as a starting point through a lens of a sustainable transport solution. We do have a number of work streams that we're about to embark on across the course of this year that I think will give us some of that information that's necessary to make sure we can make informed decisions collectively. So we haven't got that yet, but we want to get on and prepare that. So I do think, particularly picking up on your thoughts about, you know, considering carbon as a factor for the decision making, absolutely agree with that. And also the resilient solution for climate change too. So I think those two factors I'd probably like to just, we will aim to address some of that through the developing work streams, if that's okay. And I think it would be useful to, at the right time, to make sure with your support, we come back and give you some more information on that. So for now, I think that's probably all I can contribute on those questions, if that's okay.
That is absolutely okay, and yeah, we would very much welcome you coming back. I would think as a group. I've just seen Councillor Tudor's got a hand up.
Hi, yeah, just to go back an hour before we go. The gentleman who talked about the development with the proposed shop that then didn't turn into the shop. I don't know whether I nipped to the bathroom or something, but I was a bit unclear if there was any further comment or action on that, and if not, perhaps we can carry it on as a case separate to this meeting.
Yeah, but I think what we said was, I'm just looking for my notes. from this one that oh no, that was the rubber crumb one. Oh, that we were going to revisit in terms of the infrastructure planning and buildings working group.
Yeah, I'll sort of write to you separately about it, because I'm really interested in it as a case study of how developers perhaps don't do what's originally planned, and what we can do about that, if anything, and why not, etc. But I think it could be a very interesting case study, because this person has come twice to this committee now, and I think it would be interesting to pick it apart a lot more, which I'm willing to do.
Yep, more than happy to do that. Absolutely more than happy. Okay. Right. Any more comments or questions from anybody else? Okay, so actions from that item then. Kevin, you were going to just prepare us some more detailed information on the routes and how they were determined. And thank you for offering to come back. I think certainly our infrastructure working group would be very keen on keeping a close eye on this. And I think it will be good to have you back at a main SEAC meeting in the future too. So thank you very much for that. So thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Sabi. Anybody else got any other business? Okay, right. So in that case, it just falls to me to declare that our next meeting is on Monday, the 20th of March at 1 o'clock. Thank you all for your attendance and contributions. Very much appreciated. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Cassie, for looking after us. And I will declare the meeting closed. Thank you.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye.
Thank you, bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Cassie.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.